Thomas was born in New York City on October 5, 1823, to a family steeped in European history, tracing his ancestry back to notable figures such as Oliver Cromwell. His grandfather, Alexander Whaley, who manufactured flintlock muskets used in the Revolutionary War, was a participant in the Boston Tea Party and provided his home to General George Washington to use as temporary headquarters. An adventurous young man, when the cry of gold was heard in California, Thomas quickly assembled items from his family business, and on January 1, 1849, he boarded the ship Sutton, enduring a harrowing 204-day journey around Cape Horn to San Francisco to take advantage of the gold rush. Establishing a successful business and building a 2-story house on Rincon Hill, Thomas anticipated it would not be long before he could return to New York and marry his sweetheart, Anna Linnae, who he met after answering a room for rent ad that her mother had placed. However, on May 3, 1851, a fire broke out in an upholstery shop and destroyed 3/4 of the city. Thomas lost his buildings in the conflagration and, determined to begin anew, followed the advice of a fellow businessman and started over in San Diego. A civic-minded individual, he served as president of the San Diego Board of Trustees in the 1850s, making him the unofficial mayor, and also served as the county clerk. He actively participated in bringing the railroad terminus to San Diego and built a new school on nearby Mason Street for the children of Old Town. Thomas owned and operated several stores, including the first bilingual store in San Diego, and, in later years, established a career in real estate and insurance. Thomas's passport described him as 5 feet, 5 inches in height, with dark hair, hazel eyes, and an aquiline nose. Later on, daughter Lillian described him as being renowned as the handsomest old man in San Diego.
Anna Eloise Linnae was born in New York City on March 31, 1832, a descendant of wealthy textile producers from the Normandy region in France. Her father, Louis Linnae, was the premier violin and viola player in early New York and a fixture at the theaters and opera houses there. When she met Thomas, she was attending the prestigious Mrs. Green School overlooking Washington Square, a city park which was built over a graveyard containing thousands of yellow fever victims and featured a tree known as the Hangman's Elm, where executions took place during the late 18th century. Anna was no stranger to the requisite ghost stories at school, and in fact at one time during her childhood lived directly across the street from none other than Edgar Allan Poe. She was known to frighten easily, but had a good sense of humor about it, and in fact would occasionally give the neighborhood children creeping upon her porch a little scare when she'd open the front door a crack and whisper,
"Hay espantos aquí con ojos grandes. There are ghosts here with big eyes."
Frances Hinton Whaley was born on December 28, 1854 at the Burkhardt House in Old Town. A charismatic individual, Frank was remembered by his youngest sister Lillian as
a big Philind, a social being lively with a quick wit and a natural-born leader.
a man of diverse interests. Frank was an artist and musician who enjoyed several careers during his life. Getting his start in business at the age of 14 working for the San Diego Union, he went on to establish 4 newspapers in California: the San Bernardino Whatnot, the San Luis Rey Star, the El Cajon Star, and the Oceanside Sun. Whaley Street in Oceanside, California is named for Frank, who was also a Circuit Justice of the Peace and served in the United States Naval Reserves. With a deep appreciation of history, Frank had a unique understanding of the importance of his family home. In 1875, his mother wrote,
"Frank talks quite grandly of how he is going to fix up things. He seems to think this house is his and does not belong to anyone else."
When he retired, Frank did get the chance to fix up things, and after restoring the house at the turn of the century, he wanted to share the history of San Diego with the newly burgeoning tourist industry. He opened one of the earliest museums in San Diego inside the old courtroom and gave guided tours of the Whaley House and Old Town. He built a carreta, a common early conveyance pulled by a mule, and drove people to various historic sites, among them the Derby Pendleton House and the Estudio House. It was Frank's desire that the Whaley house would one day be permanently preserved as a historic museum.
Anna Emilia Whaley was born in the house on August 27, 1858, and was called Nanny by family and friends. As the eldest daughter, she took on a great deal of the household responsibilities and acted as a second mother to her younger siblings. She was described by her sister Lillian as
a shy, blushing, sentimentally inclined damsel, short, with a high forehead and prominent eyes, who loved animals and was particularly fond of a heavy-bodied black and tan pug, which she packed around most of the time in her arms. Practical and domestic, she was given to sewing and working mottos and colored worsteds and silks on perforated boards.
As the progenitor of the family, all descendants come from Nanny's line. Marrying her first cousin, John Thomas Whaley, a firefighter and peace officer who, on occasion, worked with Virgil Earp in San Bernardino, Nanny gave birth to 2 children, Mabel, born in 1882 in the house, and Bruce, born in 1890. Nanny passed away from stomach cancer at the age of 45 in Modesto, California.
George Hay Ringgold Whaley was born in San Francisco on November 5, 1862, and was described by his younger sister Lillian as
a beautiful curly-haired baby. He developed into a slow, good-natured child, given to telling stories in his own slow fashion. He was always tinkering with tools and was crazy about the violin, made one out of a cigar box with silk strings and a horsehair bow.
George was in charge of the family garden, planting roses, geraniums, oleanders, and succulents for his mother, and corn, popcorn, potatoes, melons, pumpkins, and grapes for the family table, along with fig, peach, citrus, and pepper trees. Like his maternal grandfather Linnae, George became a professional violinist, playing in all the music halls in Newtown, and to his parents' great dismay, the bars at the waterfront Stingaree district as well. A particularly beloved figure in Whaley House history, Violet Eloise Whaley was born October 14, 1862, in a rented house in San Francisco. A comfortable cottage, wrote her father Thomas in 1863.
We have a nice little courtyard in front of our house, though we're not on the sunny side of the street. The baby Violet, upon the sound of the piano, turns suddenly moving and must be stood upon her feet to make them go with the music.
Thus her love of music was rooted in infancy, and although in adulthood Violet played the piano, she preferred playing the guitar. As a child, she loved roller skating with her sister and side partner Lillian, and climbing the hills behind their house to gather wildflowers. Lillian recalled her dark-haired, gray-eyed sister Violet as naturally competitive and
an odd mixture, difficult to describe. She was all for art in everything, a good cook, a born dressmaker, all for lines and curves. When at school, she spent most of her time drawing. Proud yet sweet, humble yet haughty, polite yet insolent and impudent, careful as to the fit of her clothes, careless about her room. She shirked the washing of greasy pots and pans with all the strength of her domestic soul.
Corinne Lillian Whaley was the youngest child and the last Whaley family member to live in this house, sometimes sharing it with family and boarders, but in later years residing here alone. In 1883, Lillian was the first in a class of 6 pupils to graduate from San Diego's first high school, the Russ School, and she wrote the class song and class poem. She became a teacher and taught at National City and San Luis Rey. A lover of history, Lillian belonged to the Native Daughters of the Golden West and worked with Kate Sessions and George and Anna Marston on San Diego's first floral shows to benefit homeless women and children. Both active and residual hauntings have been witnessed here over the decades. Chairs rock, chandeliers swing, and doors open and close of their own volition. The aroma of Cuban tobacco and fine French perfume waft through the rooms, and the faint strains of guitar and violin float past from long-forgotten musical soirees, parties, and balls regularly held here. Initially rejecting the notion that her ancestral home was haunted, eventually Lillian became resigned to the fact, stating in her journal,
Here I am, 60 years of age and living in a haunted house.
Fearing that her talented family would fall into obscurity, she once wrote,
"We ought to have been a most famous bunch."
Little did she know toward the end of her life journey, living alone in a crumbling brick mansion, that her fears were unfounded.